As talked about in the past, Bionicle was a toy line that catapulted LEGO to the forefront of kids' hearts during the early to mid 2000s, with the Bionicle toy line saving LEGO from nearly closing. And considering how huge LEGO is now, it's a shame how they left the franchise. The first set was released back in 2001, following the story of the Toa Mata after mysteriously washing up on the shores of Mata Nui, tasked with protecting the island and its native Matoran, all while being prophesied to awaken the great spirit Mata Nui. On their quest, the 6 heroes battle with the Bohrok, the Bohrok Kal, Rahi beasts, the Rakshi, and finally Makuta Pterodax. The first wave of Toa was a monumental success, leading to an almost yearly set of new Toa, as well as comics, movies, and video games. 7 video games to be precise. Now, for me as a kid, I have some vague memories of being about when the Mask of Light movie was released. In particular, I have this vivid memory of being in Toys R Us with my dad and seeing this Takanuva set that I managed to find online and is labelled as set 8596 Takanuva. In the end, it probably cost too much and life moved on. It wasn't until 2004 that I actually had any Bionicle of my own, with the Toa Metru set, and in my opinion this was the most sturdy built Toa, or at least they were always the more aesthetically pleasing set. The TV adverts for this set were branded into my memory and were also accompanied by a movie that I went to go see in cinema, so by this point I was in full Bionicle fever. I even had a friend who had ordered Toa Mata from their big brother, because I think they were like Christian and well off, so they actually looked after their shit, but either way, what I'm trying to say is that Bionicle came out when I was 2, and the franchise has been with me for a while now. I never really played any of the video games, however. I may have rented the previously covered 2003 Bionicle game, but like most games I played when I was a kid, I didn't really read anything or pay attention and just ran around for a bit and then forgot about the game altogether. And considering the game when I finally completed it, I may have dodged a bullet on that one. And all this leads us up to the next chapter in my Bionicle journey. I have yet to get through all the comics and lore, and to be honest that one is going to take some time, but at the moment I'm making my way through the games. And the next one on that list is Bionicle Heroes. Can it redeem Bionicle the game, or is it another case of wasted potential?
On the island of Voya Nui, the inhabitants have been transformed into vicious creatures. Only you can use the powers of your masks to defeat the Piraka. You have what it takes to become a hero. Bionicle Heroes in stores now. Ready to be 10 plus depending on platform.
Bionicle Heroes was released for the PS2, Xbox 360, GameCube, PC, Game Boy Advance and Nintendo DS in November 2006, with a version for the Nintendo Wii released in April 2007. And it's pretty wild that the Game Boy Advance still had games coming out for it in 2007, but hey, the more you know. The PC and console versions were created by Traveller's Tales, a British game developer and subsidiary of TT Games, the company that holds the exclusive rights to LEGO video games, as well as a bunch of other tie-in games for bigger franchises. And yes, this means that they were responsible for the Skywalker saga. Englishman John Burton was the director of the game, as well as the founder of Traveller's Tales and TT Games, working as a director for LEGO video games over the past 2 decades, as well as winning a BAFTA in 2013 for Best Family Game with LEGO Batman 2 DC Superheroes. The game's story was written by Michael Humes, who has been part of the writing staff on multiple miscellaneous games through the years, from Harry Potter and Finding Nemo to the Pirates of the Caribbean and a series of unfortunate events, with the last game he worked on, according to IMDb, being X-Men Origins Wolverine in 2019, which I weirdly enough remember watching my cousin play. So yeah, moving on. Game dev Amaze Entertainment was responsible for the GBA and DS handheld versions, with a mobile phone version getting released by Universomo. What is the deal with all these early 2000 games having wacky flip phone variants? If you ever played this, comment down below. The game was originally meant to be a first-person shooter, but was switched to a third-person action-adventure game after worries about the ESRB rating, which is just the age rating for video games. Pretty much every FPS game at the time immediately got an M rating, and LEGO was not having it. So the original FPS features were shifted to the Nintendo DS, and from what I have seen, the DS version of this game looks really cool, and has a more dark, edgy look to it. So maybe I will check this game out in the future. Reception for the game was extremely mixed, receiving average to below average reviews for the most part, with the visuals and comedy being praised while the actual gameplay was deemed as being easy and repetitive. On the other hand, Bionicle Heroes for the Nintendo DS did much better, receiving an average Metacritic score of 72 out of 100, which isn't exactly excellent, but well above average if you ask me. The game was compared to the critically loved Metroid Prime Hunters game, but the game's controls left a lot to be desired. From the little look I've had at the development of this game, it seems like Traveller's Tales had put a lot of work into the FPS version, having to completely switch to the third-person mechanics in February of 2006, only giving the devs 9 months to recreate the game, which I think explains some of the shortcomings of the console variants. All of this begs the question of what Bionicle Heroes could have been had TT Games been able to deliver the experience they wanted. Just going off the DS Bionicle Heroes, I can see a Metroid Prime / Republic Commandos like dark, edgy, but ultimately quirky and unique FPS. And although I need to see a good third-person Bionicle game at some point, I think this cancelled version would have been a real hit considering Commandos had come out a year prior and to critical acclaim, but I digress. On to the story.
New Bionicle Heroes from Bionicle.
Bionicle Heroes' story breaks from the canon, so the game can feature characters from other locations and eras of the Bionicle lore. Also, instead of the Matoran being transformed into the Toa Anika by lightning from the Red Star, they instead wash up on the shore of Voya Nui and are just given the Toa masks by a villager named Balta, who informs them that Voya Nui has been taken over by 7 Piraka, who transformed its residents into vicious creatures. The newly formed Toa Anika must battle the Piraka through each of the 7 elemental zones, obtaining the Mask of Life and healing the Great Spirit Mata Nui. Now time to meet the actual Toa Anika, starting with the Toa of Fire, Jala, who, as a Matoran, was named Jala, and along with all the other Matoran, was saved from Metru Nui and taken to the island of Mata Nui by the Toa Metru. Once awakened, Vakama gives him the noble Howl mask from his mentor Lakan. Jala went on to become Turaga Vakama's right hand and leader of the Tokoro Guard, basically becoming the leader of the Mata Nui military, being pivotal to much in Mata Nui's lore, like finding Tahu when he arrives in Mata Nui, as well as in the Mask of Light movie helping Takuya find the Great Mask and becoming the 7th Toa, with Takatanuva giving up a small amount of his life force to revive him at the end of the film. When the Toa Nuva disappeared in their search for the Mask of Life, Jala gathered a small team of Matoran to go find the mask themselves. So he rules. Hyuki, the Toa of Stone, was once a successful trader of Pometru discs in Metru Nui before the Great Cataclysm. On Mata Nui, Hyuki, or Huki as he was known at the time, became Turaga Onua's right-hand Matoran, and a famous Po-Matoran athlete and co-league champion, being the greatest goal scorer at the time, and a very powerful Matoran, having the ability to crush boulders with his feet and head. The Toa of Earth Nuparu was a great inventor and miner who created the Vacuum Forcer robots from Metru Nui, as well as the Boxer combat vehicles on Mata Nui, before joining Jala. Ali, the Toa of Water, was one of Turaga no Kama's students, and was named the Gakoro Koli Champ, actually defeating Jala, Takua, and Huki in the Koli Championship, as seen in the Mask of Light. When Takua became the 7th Toa, Takanuva, Ali became the new chronicler. The Toa of Air, Kongu, was a tube monitor on Metru Nui before becoming leader of the Guko Force on Mata Nui, as well as a dethroned champion. He was later chosen to be part of the Lee Koro Koli team, but lost to the Takoro team in the semi-finals, so that's why you don't see him in the Mask of Light. And finally, Motoro, the Toro Vice, ran a Rahi shop on Metro Nui. Years later, on Matanui, Motoro became Turaga Nuju's translator, as he only spoke the bird Rahi language. Motoro became privy to many secrets at this time, also becoming the first Motoran to meet Toamata Kopaka. These 5 Motoran joined Jala on his journey to retrieve the Mask of Life and hopefully save the Toanuva, leading them to the island of Voya Nui, where they were transformed into the Toa Unika and faced the 7 Piraka. Speaking of, the Piraka were a team of 6 Skakti from Zakaz Island, and they were originally Dark Hunters, but after the defeat of Makuta Pterodax by Takanuva, they split off into their own group, calling themselves the Piraka. They find the vanquished Pterodax's Spear of Fusion, accidentally shooting Vezok and splitting them into 2 different beings, the new Skakti taking the name Vezon. The new team of 7 finds out that the Konohi Agnika, or the Mask of Life, is hidden deep in the island of Voya Nui, although this is never explained. Okay, so we got the 7 Piraka and the Toa Unika, and both are searching for the Mask of Life, and this is where the game actually starts. Now, it gets pretty simple from that point on. Just battle the Piraka for a selection of missions, defeat all 7 of them and claim the Mask of Life, saving Matanui. The end. I know the canon version of this story is way cooler and more intricate, but alas, this is a kid's game made in 9 months. The game's levels are divided into 6 regions, with a final area opening up after all 6 regions have been cleared. We've got Vezok's coastline, the water zone, Radiki's desert, the earth zone, Hakan's volcano, the fire zone, Avak's stronghold, the stone zone, Fox Mountain, the ice zone, Zaktan's jungle, the wind zone, and finally Vezok's awakening, whose element is kinetic absorption. Okay. So for the first level of each zone, you will face off against the different elemental Rakshi. You also face an important or memorable character from the Bionicle lore in each zone. Nidiki in Fox Mountain, Kreka in Avak's stronghold, Sidorak in Zaktan's jungle, Rudaka in Vezok's coastline, Axon in Radik's desert, Brutaka in Hakan's volcano, and then Vezon and Fenrak at the very end of the game. For most of the game, you'll be slaughtering wave upon wave of Borak, Vizorak, and Vaki. Okay, how does the game actually play? And well, I have to agree with the reviews. Your elemental gun just locks onto enemies, so for the most part, I just play as Jala or Hali, whose weapons just permafire and hold down the X button and let the lock-on button do the rest. But what about your health? Well, that would be an issue, but when you die, you just switch to another one of the Toa masks if you have one. So you can just switch to one of the worst masks like Motoro when your health gets low, and then just go back to Jala after losing that mask. And using this strategy, I didn't actually die once in the game. Especially once you have fully upgraded your weapons and armor, you are pretty much just invincible. Speaking of, those weapon upgrades are as follows. Jala's weapons are Vakama's disc launcher, Tahu's fire sword, and the energized flame sword. Hali's got her laser harpoon, Gali's water hooks, and Toa no Kama's hydro blades. Huki has his laser axe, the Pokoro, and Toa Onua's proto pitons. Nuparu has a laser drill, Wenua's earth shock drills, and Onua's claws. Kongu's got his laser crossbow, Lua's air axe, and Matao's arrow slicers. Finally, we have Motoro, who has his energized ice sword, Kopaka's ice sword, and Nuju's crystal spikes. And I'm not going to bother talking about the Piraka's weapons and abilities because you don't get to play as them until the game's already completed. Now, gameplay-wise, these weapons don't actually make much of a difference. They look different and they do more damage, but they work exactly the same as the standard weapon. And with the whole lock-on mechanic, it's pretty hard to notice if they actually do more damage anyway. But you gotta love the references and callbacks to other Toa in the Bionicle universe through the weapon names / design. But this isn't enough to distract you from the lazy game development. Another thing that felt rather lazy but may be familiar to you is Hero Mode. You achieve this by collecting a certain amount of LEGO pieces, and this is a feature in every LEGO game I have ever played. But in this game, achieving Hero Mode just makes you gold and you press circle to activate something. This mechanic is used to defeat every boss battle and takes what little excitement you could have had away, as you just mow down waves of mobs to activate Hero Mode that will then take some of the boss's hearts away. By fully upgrading all your Toa, you also get to use their full abilities, usually to help find silver and gold canisters, which, again, just boils down to having the right mask equipped and clicking circle. So yeah, all in all, if they just took out the lock-on aim, this game would be so much more challenging and fun. The aspect of this game that really hit, however, is the design. The Bionicles look fantastic, and luckily they actually look like the figures you would build and not the weird creatures we saw in the movies. The elemental zones aren't really all that different apart from a reskin, but in this case, that's fine. And I actually think the music is pretty good as well, with the soundtrack for Hakan's Volcano and Zaktan's Jungle standing out. Gotta love that the Fire Piraka has to have shitty rock music for its own soundtrack. So to wrap things up, the game looks great, and is everything we have always wanted, true to the LEGO figure character models. And as you'll see from my footage, the game upscales fantastically in emulators. The story is admittedly simple, but at least one that vaguely follows the story arc of the Toa and Nika and the search for the Mask of Life. Also, the game is jam-packed with references and nuggets of the Bionicle lore. But is it enough? The music isn't as good as it could be considering it's Bionicle, in my opinion, but does the job. Some Cryoshell or just some more songs that capture that mysterious vibe like in the movies would have been a great addition. The gameplay is slow and extremely easy. Thinking back to Bionicle the game, it was at least difficult just purely on how broken and janky the game was. Whereas Bionicle Heroes may look good and run smoothly, but is the gaming equivalent of watching paint dry. Although, if you have a smoke and chuck a podcast on, it's pretty chill. At the end of the day, TT Games got screwed and had to basically make an entirely different game in 9 months. And it shows. All my hope lies in the Masks of Power. For all the bad things I've said about this game, I can't bring myself to really hate Bionicle Heroes. Is it a case of wasted potential? Absolutely. Could you argue that it's a soulless third-person game nostalgia baiting for money? Yeah, I guess you could. But in the end of the day, it's Bionicle, and the supply is finite. Besides any fan projects, this is all we are getting. And I'll take what I can get.